In this video, we're going to talk about quiet cracking, and what's going on is many people are really struggling with their job, right? They're cracking up with this broken society. Now, if you're someone who's dealing with a lot of workplace stress, you're stressed about your current work situation, quiet cracking seems to be the new normal for many employees these days. They're suffocating in jobs without any progress, without any signs of future or hope of progress at all, right? And I have one-to-one coaching that I offer to help my clients build a step-by-step plan to escape burnout, secure high-paying roles and stable opportunities. Recently, one of my clients actually secured a job paying over $200,000, and that's great for him, and he's working remotely. So if you want to schedule a call with me to fix your career situation, let me know. Just click the link in the comments and we can get started. Now, in this video, we're going to go through a few examples of people who are quiet cracking, which is a new trend in the workplace. Employees are just tired and worn out from work. Let's listen to this clip here.
It is currently taking the average job seeker in America 22.6 weeks to find a job. That's over 5 months. This is important to know because if you are job searching and you feel like you're hitting a wall, it's maybe not just you. Forbes put this article out about the state of the white-collar job market. Here are some of the key insights. So despite the fact that in September we saw about 254,000 new jobs posted, there has been a steady decline in the amount of jobs that are available. Jobs in construction, healthcare, government, food services, those are trending upward, which is great news. If you are searching for a more white-collar position, things are getting more competitive. Hiring is becoming more complex. Jobs are requiring multiple rounds of interviews, rigorous assessments. We're also seeing remote jobs slowly declining. In 2022, they were at their peak, and job postings with remote and hybrid options are slowly decreasing. Part of that is due to Amazon's recent mandate to have their employees come back to the office full-time. Big tech often influences the rest of corporate America. We're seeing a lot more offices want people back in person. If you are applying to remote jobs, the competition will be even higher. While there have been a lot of layoffs in the tech world, more specialized tech professionals are still in high demand. And professionals with even basic AI skills are very appealing at the moment. So if you're looking for a way to upskill and to learn something new in this time that you are searching, AI skills should be at the top of your list. And there is some good news here. The US job market has demonstrated remarkable resilience. September's hiring figures surpassed expectations. Have heart and make sure that your application is as strong as possible, even if that means customizing your materials every single time. And when you apply for a position, when you interview for a position, follow up, send a thank you note, ask if there's anything else that you can provide, show interest. You need to stand out in this job market.
Wide-eyed Becky, who's making some decent points, to be honest, right, with the ginger hair. So first time for everything. Now, what we've got to go through in this is really talk about why people are quiet cracking, right? It's because not only they're in jobs they can't handle or they don't like, they're stressed out from that and they can't really find other good opportunities in the job market, right? So firstly, of course, if you're maintaining your savings and investments, try to max that out. They typically say 6 months of saving or investments is good, but of course I would say you should aim for at least a year or more because the job market is so unstable. The one thing I'd say is, the thing is, a lot of people talk about going into the trades, right? Blue collar jobs. And I think that's good. And you can definitely earn a decent amount of money from that. The only issue is that those roles aren't high paying, right? So unless you maybe become self-employed and you have a 6-figure kind of self-employed as a plumber or electrician, something like that, then that can work out. But if you're working in a lot of those typical construction companies, you're not going to be making that type of money. And with the white collar jobs, people are struggling because you have these draining interview processes, right? I've worked on it with my clients. I've had it when I was interviewing at certain companies. We have 5 to 9 interviews and they're spread out over multiple weeks and it goes on for months and months. And just interviewing for one job can go on for 3 or 4 months and it becomes a bit ridiculous. And the way to deal with that, firstly, is a lot of questions are common across many interviews. And I do a lot of interview practice with my clients. So I know this from my previous experience. So you just learn certain answers that are repetitive and you just answer them in a professional way. And it reminds me of when you hear about celebrities who are promoting a movie and they go through media training before they go through all these interviews about their movie that they're promoting. So they know all the standard questions that are going to come up. What's the funny story backstage when you're filming this scene? What's the story of the movie about? And it's the same thing about your career. Tell me a bit about yourself, summarize your CV for me. What level of skills do you have in relation to maybe a particular expertise area? That's the type of things that will come up. So you should prepare again and again for that. If once you standard answers by heart, it's a bit like a celebrity promoting their movie, right? They're going to be able to repeat them without too much hassle or stress. And then the one thing that people forget often, and I've noticed this when I've interviewed people at investment banks to work for my teams, is that they would often not do much research on what's exactly going on at the company in the last few years or months. So I'd say, oh, what do you think we'd be working on right now? And they just don't have any idea. And it's a bit worrying because it's like you're applying for a job. You should know not only what we do on a day-to-day basis, but what type of projects we're working on. It's quite funny because the answers tend to vary depending on what's the trending topic. For example, I remember when DEI was quite popular a couple of years ago, the answers from one of these people who was interviewing with us, she just kept saying she really supports diversity and diversity is a big deal for her. And she just didn't have any technical knowledge. And I realized that with many other people, or they just have an interest area, maybe a specific part of finance like derivatives, and that's all they know about. But you've got to do research on the company and what's actually going on there. If you're going to have an interview at Amazon, are you aware of the latest news there, any latest scandals they might be having, any latest big projects where they're growing? Maybe they're growing certain warehouses in different countries, maybe they're growing in emerging markets. So you need to have a bit of an awareness of that. The other thing is she's talking about have a heart when it comes to some of these jobs. I would say you should be detached because interviewing for a lot of companies is a bit like speed dating. And then she talks about sending a thank you note after an interview. I wouldn't do that, but I would recommend what she's saying where you do show an interest and enthusiasm, right? That's through doing company research, and when you're in the interview, making sure it comes across that you're keen and you about what's going on at the company right now. You're not just trying to work there because it's a big name company. The other thing to know is that you want to make sure that your resume is tailored to jobs that you're really aiming for, right? And you don't want to go through a situation where you're applying for 100 jobs and you tailor make your CV to each of them. You should probably have a generic CV aimed at most roles that are in your niche, and then maybe tailor make and make some edits to your resume when it comes to specific roles that you really want to work. So for example, if I was applying for just broad-based finance roles, I'd have a resume for that. If I was applying for specific sales and trading roles or something niche in that like fintech, then I'd amend my resume for that because it's quite niche and maybe it's something I really want to work in. That's when you should edit your resume rather than think, oh, every job application I have to change my resume. That's just a waste of time. The other thing is about aiming for remote jobs. I know everyone wants to work remote, or most of you do in some sense, but it's just harder to do that, particularly at the bigger companies. So if you're looking at startups, you're looking at smaller companies or remote first companies, then you might have that opportunity. But on the whole part, it's going to be a bit difficult if you're aiming for remote jobs when they're just not as popular or available as they used to be. The thing is AI, right? And I know there's different views on AI. I cover different views on my live streams, typically on Fridays and things like that. I think on one hand, yes, AI is going to become implemented in more workflows and you'll probably use it as part of your workflow in terms of AI agents. But sometimes I think people overstate that. And the problem is, even though it's being overstated, the impact of AI on some jobs, it's still a buzzword that middle management and senior management want to talk about. So you have to mention that on your resume in some sense. Competent in AI, maybe used AI in a few recent work projects. You make up a few things on your resume about working on AI in your last few work tasks in your last company. Because AI is such a buzzword, it just makes sense to add it to your resume, right? At least 3 to 5 times I would recommend it. And then also, like in the past, blockchain was a big buzzword in certain areas of finance. You just had to pretend you'd been working on blockchain or you'd done some work around it and you know it and you understand blockchain's the future. And in the past, blockchain is the future, but it never really took over. Now they say AI is the future, which I think will have an impact, but it's still overstated in my opinion, at least for the short term. Now let's look through another clip here.
As an immigrant to Canada.
So we've got a clip from this Canadian chud, angry Canadian immigrant. So let's listen to some of his info here.
What's up, America? I'm going to be real with you here because I see no future for people in America. After seeing the high cost of homes nationwide, the high cost of gas, the high cost of food, the high cost of rental, used cars, insurance, healthcare, taxes, and every other thing, how is anybody in this country supposed to prosper that's not already wealthy? Could someone tell me that? The pulling yourself up by your bootstraps argument is and over. It doesn't work now. You have average home prices of $512,000. Grocery prices are almost 100% more since 4 years ago. Same with rent, same with mortgages, same with used cars, same with new cars. I just saw a story about a nurse with a $75,000 salary a year and an 808 credit score denied for getting a home. 0 student loan, so debtless, making 75 grand a year with an over 800 credit score, not good enough for a house. So what are we doing here? What's the end goal? Starvation? Death? What's going on here? No matter what you do, no matter how you spend the finances, the middle class and the poor have no upward mobility. There is no hope now. No hope. None. 0. The next 2 or 3 generations are because you allowed so much greed. Younger generations will never have shit because of your greed. I've already broken my back trying to make ends meet working for the last 30 years. I already know I'm not gonna get anything from the rich. I don't give a but the younger generations, if you keep stealing and being greedy, they're gonna all be homeless. And then what do you have? Ruling over a bunch of homeless people? You.
What's it with the angry ginger people, man? They seem to be having all types of mental breakdowns right now. So anyway, so the thing is quiet cracking, right? Which is, as I mentioned before, you have people breaking down. And I see this generally, you see it on public transport. You see people being short-tempered with each other a lot of the time. There really is no future in many cases for the middle class, right? And the thing is, I think who does have a successful future that will occur in the next few years or decades. And I think if you're a beta male simp, you'll do fine because you'll drink the corporate Kool-Aid, you'll play along with it, and you'll be fine in that case. If you're a girl boss and companies are going to continue having a bias in favor of that demographic, they'll be fine. But if you want to have a family or you want to be a traditional man, maybe have traditional gender roles, things like that, then you'll be on the fringes of society. And that's why the things I teach through coaching, finance, personal finance, investing and things like that will give you that freedom to be a freedom-focused man, to be more focused on your freedom as an independent man, and then have a family if that suits your needs, right? What you don't want to do is be a whinging man like this, and there's so many men like this throughout society. It reminds me of the angry boomers who just spend all the time watching politics, Fox News, GBN, or the CNNs of the world, or BBC News, whatever that would be, and they're always whinging and complaining about everything, but they're not taking any action, right? They're not spending time to set up a business or change their living style, maybe downsizing in their property to save more money. They're just whinging all the time. And it reminds me of when he talks about right now, oh, what are people going to do? How are they going to survive in the future? And it reminds me of when you get the opposite of what he's doing. In a sense, you get these self-righteous posturing and advice from someone like a Ben Shapiro who talks about you need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and just get on with things and work hard and you'll be successful. But that kind of often doesn't work. And then you have a lot of people who will really struggle without having a network like a Ben Shapiro, for example, to make millions of dollars. And the other thing is, not only is the job situation becoming worse, the cost of living is becoming quite high, of course, and no one wants to talk about it because everyone wants to pretend everything's normal. No one wants to appear like a victim or weak to others. Everyone wants to pretend things are normal even if they just lost their job. And then what ends up happening is you have high cost for basic living standards, right? And then you have no increase in quality. And what ends up happening is, he says, there's no upward mobility. So people are like, why should I work hard? And that's why people are cracking up at work, because they're like, if I work hard and get promoted and get a small pay rise, that's not going to change anything. I might as well just chill and just live life at this lower living standard. It's just going to get worse anyway. A little bit of extra money is not going to change anything dramatically. And then he's talking about people not being able to have families and not having kids. And I think that's completely valid. I talk about all the time. It's a big topic, and I've seen some comments don't like my view on that. I just think as a man, you should think very carefully if you're going to have kids, because it's going to cost a lot more money than you think. Also, the entire infrastructure around you is failing, right? For example, whole education system is brainwashing kids with all this woke ideology about pronouns and all types of weird other ideas around race or gender, climate, all these type of things. And it's like, if you have kids, then not only are you going to be paying high tax as any other citizen would, but then you're not going to get anything back for that. You're going to have to probably pay for extra costs to teach your kids outside of school, homeschool them, or hire a private tutor, because the schooling system's trash. And that's going to take time, effort, and energy out your day, on top of being stressed about your job that might not be stable. So just really think that through. And then if you go through a divorce, you could lose a lot of money in that. So really think carefully about those situations. Most people are going to be stuck on survival mode in one sense or the other for the majority of their life, based on how the system's currently set up. He also mentions here that, there's a lot of greed, and that's why people are poor, because the elite have a lot of greed. But the establishment, what it's really done is engage in a lot of money printing, and that money printing has led to a deliberate destruction of the middle class, because people can't invest their money at a fast enough pace to keep up with the assets that they want to invest in. So in the end, they end up having worthless cash money rather than investing as much as maybe the rich can. The other thing is to note is he's talking about the collapse of birth rate, right, which I mentioned, less people having kids. And what I noticed, you have less people in the West having kids, but these countries are importing so many migrants, and you might be paying 40% income tax, so that's going to provide a migrant with a large family, right? They're going to have all the government benefits, so they can have 5 kids and you can't even have 1 or 2 kids at best, right? And then what ends up happening is people are cracking and giving up, and they're losing their motivation. They're becoming quite demotivated. And I think, what is a long-term game plan? And that's what he's trying to ask here. What is the long-term game plan of this system? And I've seen many different theories about this, but the most realistic theory I can think is the system doesn't want a middle class. They want a rich, they want a poor, but what type of poor do they want? They want a mass of low IQ, easy to control, poor underclass. They don't want a lower class, they want an underclass, which means just people who can really just do the bare minimum in terms of surviving. There's no middle class, there's no upward social mobility like he's saying, right? There's just low IQ people who have basic service level jobs, and they're dependent on government handouts. They can get cancelled at any moment. They're constantly worried about their job stability. And this is quite interesting because there's a comment right here that explains it. One lone Canadian, as you can see here, this is why Canada's modern immigration policies, mainly aimed at those coming from countries that were living in poverty and squalor, is normal, and in the new world is beginning to look like the third world. And I've said this on my channel, right? If you're living in the first world, right, or in the developed countries like America, UK, Europe, the West, right, you're basically paying first world prices for third world living standards. Increasingly, you're not getting these top-notch thing. Everything's so inefficient and clunky, and there's so many errors and mistakes happening in general. So you have to really question, why are you paying so much money for such low quality goods and services? But that's what it's like when you're in a lot of these countries. Let's listen to a clip of this guy going through a struggle session.
Financial anxiety is so debilitating, and it makes you feel like a loser. Can I just do porn?
I just had a very brief clip there. We're going to go through a longer clip in a moment. But this is what I mean about people cracking up. I know, and it's kind of crazy when you see a guy do it who he's not a woman, of course, and he's not like typical soy boy bug man you typically see, right? A weak guy crying on the internet. This guy's having a mental breakdown, right? The whole point is, if people can't progress, they end up acting desperate on social media, or venting on social media, or venting to others, and you're going to see things like that. And then what ends up happening, what's interesting is how other people react. And maybe people in his comments might relate, but I think when you see things like this in public in one way, shape or form, everyone's like, well, that's that guy's problem, it's not my problem. And because you have that kind of mentality, that kind of individualistic mentality, which I get, you're just gonna have more and more people like, oh, fuck that person, I don't care if they're suffering, I don't care if he's on the street, I don't care if these people are homeless, or that person can't afford that, at least it's not me. And there's only so long that can exist until society does crack up, put on the screen, right? This thing he mentioned here briefly was finance anxiety. And I think everyone's feeling that, or a lot of people are feeling that right now. He's in that position of having a breakdown right now because that level of anxiety is getting to him. Now we've got a clip of this completely deranged woman. Listen to her here.
I'm whispering because I don't want nobody to know I'm crying. But why is it that I work and I still can't afford money to pay for my shit? I don't want a second job, but I can't afford shit. I just want to be rich. All y'all that are rich, I'm so proud of you, but I can't. I just want to be rich. You've risen up my fucking car payment to $500. My rent, $600. And all my other bills. Don't even talk about that because it leaves me with nothing. I have to eat ramen because I can't afford groceries. I'm done.
This is really psychotic behavior. This is demonic behavior. This is Baphomet in the flesh, right? So these type of people, I understand people are struggling right now, but this isn't the right approach to be taking, right? There has to be some self-quality control of the way you conduct yourself in public, right? And I think it's interesting. This is transitioning. We are going through this process a lot slower than I thought it would happen. Over the next few months and years, you're going to go from individual crash outs to society-wide spread crash outs. You're not just going to see people protesting about a conflict overseas or people protesting for one reason or the other. More and more people are going to be like, well, hold on, the economy is screwed. And lots of people are becoming so obsessed with politics because they're screwed in their personal life because of the financial situation, right? They're crashing out at societal level. And when you have many people like this, like we've just seen in the last few clips, you're going to have things like socialism, and people want it to push for more tax, which sounds like a good idea. But when governments typically increase tax, it doesn't go, it's not extra tax for billionaires or big companies. It ends up being higher tax for just the upper middle class. So people who'd be maybe at the 200k income level, they're going to get taxed more. So it's like aspirational jobs you're aiming for end up going to paying a lot more tax. You think the ultra rich is going to be paying a lot more tax, but it will be people at lower levels than that. And eventually will impact you, that higher tax rate you're saying that you want to get to benefit from, right? Now, this is what I mean. People are actually crashing out in private like this, like what she's doing here, which I think she mentioned earlier in a clip. I didn't include it here, where she's in the bathroom of her workplace, right, crashing out. This is what people are doing, right? People are actually crashing out like this. They're pretending things are normal in public when they go into the office, when they're walking around in public, right? But behind closed doors, they're really crashing out like this. The other thing I wanted to say is, how will weak-minded people make it? Because I talked about, different challenges earlier in my career or in recent years. Like a lot of weak-minded people, for lack of a better term, people like you see on your screen right now, they're not going to make it. They're going to end up crashing out. They're going to end up having mental breakdowns. And then either you're going to have to carry the burden of the extra work that they're not doing in the office because they kind of brain fog. They just reduce their mind to slush because they're always stressed out and burnt out from dopamine, burnt out from doom scrolling, things like that. I see all those type of things. They play out with a lack of productivity, with just a lack of social interaction and things like that. And then what ends up happening is that people have to carry the burden of doing their extra work. And thank God I'm single. Thank God, and I'm not carrying the burden of paying their living costs, dealing with their unstable financial situation. And on top of it, having a completely babbling girlfriend like this, right? Complete bipolar disorder girlfriend who's dumping her psychotic, neurotic thoughts. Dumping them verbally on you after you get back from work and you're stressed about work. That's why being single in many ways does come with a lot of benefits. You can pursue more of a minimalist life than some of these personality types who will be so concerned with not being a minimalist, developing other skills, do this as calmly and efficiently as possible, this difficult economic upheaval and turmoil. They'll be focused on keeping up with everyone else. Everyone else is going to that music concert and getting drunk. I have to go too. And it's like, well, no, you don't. It's best if you don't follow the crowd. But people like this, and particularly a lot of women who like to follow the crowd or weaker men, they will just end up in a perpetual cycle like this, stressing about everything, right? So anyway, shout out to ramen chads, shout out to high carb chads if you want to eat a lot of carbs because you can't afford the high quality produce, then it is what it is. Shout out to them. I'm not judging. And this is what I mean. What is her best option in this case, this psychobabble GF? Well, what this weird, I don't even know how I'm meant to describe this kind of demon bitch. Like we're talking about, this is a demon bitch right here, right? Look at the eyes. This is reptilian shape-shifting humanoid type behavior. Now, what is her best option? And what is the best option for many women in this situation, thinking they were going to go into a high power career when they end up in some dead end 9-to-5? Her best option is to out of the career and become a trad wife. That's the best option, to find a guy to cling on to, do the hard work and labor while she lives a relatively low cost of living lifestyle and he does the hard work and she does the household chores. You're going to see some reversion to tradition, whatever the meme is, where they're going to have to be like, oh, okay, we'll have to kind of back the that girlfriend because she doesn't want to deal with the stress of work and finances and things like that, right? So not by wanting to do that, she has to do that. It becomes a need. It's not a want. She's just like, I need to find a guy I can lean on. That's why you should watch out as a guy, because there's going to be a lot more of this type of behavior, and they're going to depend on you to pick up the pieces and carry her over the line and carry her stress and her living costs.
Quiet cracking is the ideal of persistent unhappiness in the workplace, leading to disengagement, poor performance, and a desire to quit. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, that's been happening at the job forever. However, one of the reasons like the whole quiet cracking thing is getting worse is because you have a bad job market, and also there's the ideal of like coming to take everybody's jobs. So basically this is like a mental health thing. Basically people are quietly cracking up at work. This is what the study's showing. The study was done by a group called Talent LMS, and they said 54% of people reported like these feelings. Okay? We are seeing like, I think the next stage in this whole job thing we've been going through. Remember the Great Resignation? Like, I think we're seeing the different levels of like reacting to work currently. Okay.
That's a short clip, right? The job market's bad. The work environment has its toxicity. The social environment isn't great. And he goes through those different phases, quiet quitting, the Great Resignation, where people are quitting their job, putting in less effort. Then you've got people who are, more recent years, job hugging, they're focusing on keeping their job, but so worried about losing it, and quiet cracking, which we see here, right? People are cracking up under the pressure of their job. And also another thing here is, I think he mentioned here, where quite a high percentage of people, like 50% of people are actually quite stressed with their job and the way things are going. So let's go back to another clip here.
If anyone can help me, it's TikTok right now. My husband has been looking for a job for 6 months and has not found anything. Funny thing is, he's getting like a ton of interviews, like a lot. He's probably gone on like 20 interviews, and he ends up going like all the way to the end, and they either decide that they're not going with him, like found a better candidate, or they just decide to stop the process altogether, and they're just like, oh, we're reworking things internally, like just pausing the whole thing for right now, and I don't know what to do. He has 8 years experience in software engineering and programming. He's a developer. He's worked with, and he's ready to work. He's willing to work, and he's currently doing Uber Eats right now. And I just never thought our lives would get here. So if anybody has any encouraging words or advice or a job to give my husband, let me know.
Now, this is what I mean, right? This is the type of GF you might have to deal with, because you can imagine how much the financial pressure will be on your own head as a man. But then your girlfriend will be potentially complaining or whinging on TikTok, like, oh, please, I'm begging for a job for my husband who can't find it. This is the type of situation you might want to avoid. But like I said, it's up to you, because I get the impression from her, she just got through a heated emotional argument with her boyfriend, or she's been crying about the situation. I don't know which one. But this is the reality for many people. There's going to be a lot more financial instability, right? The guy she's mentioning, the guy she's in a relationship with, who's been working as a software engineer for 8 years, who's been struggling to find a job for the last 6 months. I hope he saved his money during those good years when he was making probably a high 6-figure salary as an experienced software engineer, right? And this is a tough reality for people. I covered a different video where someone who's working in, I believe it was in the finance industry, in the tech department in finance, he actually went into food delivery like Uber Eats, something like that too, right? And this is what's going on here, right? So people are reverting to all types of jobs you wouldn't believe. I know people who worked, and you'd be surprised about this too, is people who've worked as radio broadcasters, right? And particularly when people had famous internet shows, and they go into driving Uber too. The other thing is, you can save your money and invest effectively, and you live more like a minimalist rather than try to live the middle class lifestyle. You'll be fine. And this is the thing, I don't know their personal life, who you see on your screen right now. I assume they're dinks, which is double income, no kids, which means you have a man and a wife, a man and a woman who both working relatively well-paying office jobs, and they don't have any kids. But what they try to do, if they still try to live the middle-class normie lifestyle, often to restaurants and maybe going to sports events to watch like matches, and they're going out all the time and spending a lot of money. And that's what ends up happening with a lot of guys who are in relationships with these type of women. They just don't realize they're just becoming a dumb consumer like she is. They're not building anything. It's not like they're building a family, building a life together. They're just being the dumb consumer in the local city that they're in. They go and work their office job, then spend the whole weekend spending money, just wasting money being a consumer, watching Netflix every night of the week. And then they spend Friday getting some food in. Then they spend Saturday going to a restaurant. Then they spend Sunday going to brunch. And they end up wasting all their money and just talking to doing nothing. That's why I think you should be careful if you're going to get into a relationship. Think about how much time is going to get wasted. This isn't the time for this type of pointless, delusional living the middle class lifestyle that's not going to exist, that doesn't really exist anymore. The whole point is you need to get low, stay low, be a minimalist. Don't try to live the boomer lifestyle that doesn't really exist. You won't be able to afford it over the longer term. As you can see, they probably lived a relatively comfortable life the last few years, but now it's going to get difficult and they just aren't prepared for it. Now, it's easier to do the next few years, the next 5 years at least, as a single man, just in my opinion, rather than play the social status game or the easy life game, which is the living life on easy mode like most women with their careers, right? And the companies are going to be less willing to fire women because they want to keep their equality statistics. So it's more likely men are going to get fired. And if they're going to be looking at their racial hiring statistics or LGBT hiring statistics, if you're straight, if you're white, if you're Asian, they probably want to get rid of you too, right? You're probably going to be higher on the list because they will still want to maintain their diversity target. So in many cases like this, where a white woman is in a relationship with a white guy or different race guys, and then she will keep her career during a lot of job cuts, and then these guys will lose their job a lot more frequently, not because they're less effective, but just because the whole office politics and social skills environment really is biased to women, specifically white women, whereas other people are more likely to lose their job. It's a reoccurring pattern, right? So her boyfriend, maybe he's a white guy, a straight white guy, and then the company looks at their diversity statistics. They need to have more other demographics, more women, more people of color, things like that. He could have become a victim of that, right? We don't know all the situations, but I'm trying to give you examples of real things I've seen because companies do track all that type of information. Now, if you're a single guy, you're not playing the social status game. You're not trying to fit in with others, with the time wasters, the money wasters. You're building a side business. You're saving your money. You're trying to live a more self-sufficient life, whether that's making your own food, if you're in a position where you can buy some land, grow your own food, you're living off grid, whatever that would be, you're really building a self-sufficient plan. Now's not the time to be like, oh, I have to get one promotion, one level up. Yeah, you want to make as much money from your corporate career and you want to take advantage of the corporate environment as much as possible, but you don't want to be a dumb consumer in your free time doing nothing productive, right? You don't want to be listening to boomers who are going to tell you, oh, you need to get married and have an expensive wedding and buy a big expensive house. That's not sustainable, right? Everyone else who's trying to follow the crowd, they're not living a sustainable life. This is what I notice with most people. When they're making important decisions about their life, they're just asking around, oh, what's everyone else is doing? Everyone else is getting the jab, I'll get the jab. Everyone else is thinking they're going to get married before they hit 30, I'll do that. Everyone else is going to send their kids to an expensive private school, I'll do that. There's no independent thought, and that's why you end up in the same problems everyone else is. Most people are not thinking for themselves. If you take anything from my channel and what I'm saying, you need to think for yourself. Now, we went through a ton of clips there. You see the real trend that you might be dealing with too, and people don't want to talk about it because it feels kind of awkward, but quiet cracking is the new normal, right? Workers are suffocating in jobs with no future, no progress, and no hope, right? And my one-to-one coaching will really help build a step-by-step plan to give you a solution to escape burnout so you can secure high-paying, stable job opportunities before the economy continues to get worse in 2026, right? So it's best to schedule a call right now. I'll be happy to help you discuss your situation. Let me know in the comments how do you feel about quiet cracking. 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, and I'll see you next time.